Good evening, friends. This is Dr. Bhavani Shankar, and today we'll be discussing about tools of qualitative data collection. In the previous classes, we have discussed like there are two types of research designs. One is qualitative research design, and the other one is quantitative research design. So here we'll be discussing about the tools which are going to be helpful in gathering the information for the qualitative studies. So when we talk about qualitative studies, my dear friends, we may use both primary data as well as secondary data for our study. So whenever we talk about qualitative data, the two primary data, the researcher is going to gather the information from the respondents directly. So these studies, qualitative studies, they mainly aim to ensure a greater level of depth of understanding, and qualitative data collection methods include interview, questionnaire method, focus group interviews, observation, ethnographic studies, case studies, historical analysis, and sometimes we also use oral history whenever there is no lipi. At the time, there are no records, nothing like at the time. We also try to gather the information about the people through oral way. So we also call it as oral history and so on. So these are the methods which we are going to use in terms of qualitative studies. Along with the primary data, my dear friends, sometimes we may also use secondary data for our studies. Secondary data is nothing but the data which is already published in the form of magazines, articles in the magazines or journals or in the newspapers, or else they have published the books, or else even the government will come up with government records, government gazette reports, and so on. All these are the secondary sources of data. Using this data, my dear friends, we can also do qualitative studies, my dear friends. Now, let us discuss about observation in detail. Observation is nothing but to see something with a purpose. We call it as observation. For example, I hope any one of you must have gone to the vegetable market. Once you have gone to the vegetable market along with your parents or you all alone, you did not directly go to a vendor and purchase the vegetables. You must have gone across the market and then you must have gone to a vendor. That means you're going to see where the vegetables are fresh. At the same time, you're going to see where you're going to get it for cheaper price. Then, when you're going to pick the tomatoes, for example, you want to purchase the tomatoes. If you want to cook on the same day, you're going to take the ripened one. Or if you want to cook the tomatoes after a week's time, you're going to take kacha wala, not the ripened one. So that during this week's time, it can sustain. At the same time, you're also going to see whether they are rotten, whether it has any worms or something like that. Means you're a good observer, seeing something with a purpose. We call it as observation. Observation is used in terms of social sciences, my dear friends, for gathering the information about people, about events, about processes, culture, and so on, my dear friends. So, in the qualitative studies, my dear friends, mostly we will be using participant observation. The main focus of the researcher is to have a sociological explanation for the social phenomena, my dear friends. So it is a complex research method which is often required the researcher to play a number of roles. So when he goes for the study, my dear friends, in the participant observation, he goes to the people and tell them who he is, and he is going to involve with the people. He is going to involve in all the day-to-day activities so that he gains more insights about the people, about their life, about their culture, and so on, my dear friends. And the results of observation entirely depends on the skills of the researcher, because he must be very very active. He must be able to observe the people in the natural settings and understand the day to day lives, my dear friends. If the researcher is not active, if the researcher is not going to mingle with the people thoroughly, then obviously, my dear friends, he or she will not be able to gather the information. So observation as a field setting, observation is going to involve uh, four things, my dear friends. First one is we must be continuously engaged in the social setting or social situation. If we are not constantly engaged, my dear friends, we miss some of the aspects. Second one is we must be clearly expressed, self conscious, and we must be representing. And we are also going to express, ensure that how we are going to observe the things or how the things are being observed. These are very, very important. The third one is logical and methodological understanding of the settings. And the last one is how you are going to document. These are the four things which we are going to require, my dear friends. Continuous engagement in the settings, clearly expressed, and how you are going to observe, how the observation is taken place. Third one is logical and methodological understanding of the setting, and recording or documenting one's observation. These are the four things which. So when we talk about logical and methodological understanding of the setting, remember, guys, you need to have the understanding about the population where you're going to study. Their likes, their dislikes, what are the culture, what are the traditions, what are accepted, what are not accepted. All these things you need to keep in mind so that when you're going to observe the people, you'll not fall into trouble, my dear friends. You need to have understanding about them. Now, let us discuss about the types of observation. My dear friends, observation can be classified into participant observation as well as non-participant observation. In the participant observation, the researcher is going to be a part of the research. That means he is going to be part of the people on whom he is going to conduct the study. So he is going to involve in the people's activities, day-to-day activities, and he tries to understand their life. In this method, the researcher participates in the day to day activities along with the group which he is being observed, my dear friends. In this process, the researcher establishes a many sided and long term relations with the individuals and groups, that too in the natural settings, my dear friends, so that we can understand the purpose of developing a scientific understanding of those individuals or the groups which are being observed. When we are going for participant observation, my dear friends, we have to keep or we need to understand three important aspects. One is pragmatism. This emphasizes that social life is not fixed. Remember, society is dynamic, so even our social life is dynamic. Hence, the society is going to change, and even our life, our perceptions, our character, everything goes on changing, my dear friends. So the people's life is constantly changing. So the researcher must participate in the live settings so that he can experience the life of the individuals. He can also understand how the transformation is taking place in the society, what kind of effects it has on the society, whether we have a positive or a negative effect on the society, and we can record it and we can also interpret the social reality. We call it as pragmatism. For example, for example, long back, maybe 4 5 decades back, girls was confined to the four walls. She was treated like her duty is to take care of the household activities, get married, give birth to children, take care of children, take care of husband and household activities. That was there. But in the modern societies, my dear friends, girls are encouraged to go for higher education. They are encouraged to do the job of their choice, and we can see plenty of transformation happening. And it is going to have a positive effect on the society that even women are treated as a prospective human resource, and they're going to contribute not only to the family but also to the economy of the nation, my dear friends. At the same time, my dear friends, we also see certain negative effects. We can see that eve teasing or exploitation at the workplace, at home, on the streets, and so on, my dear friends. So we can understand this. After understanding this, my dear friends, in order to address the issues of women at the workplace, at home, and so on, my dear friends, we have certain policies or rules and regulations. At the same time, we also have she teams whose main duty is to protect the girls from eve teasing and so on. So society is dynamic. Remember, it goes on changing. So our duty is to understand the changes which are taking place, my dear friends. So we call this process pragmatism. Second one is formalism. This argues that while social relations may differ from each other, they also take different forms. At the same time, they also display certain similarities. In this way, the researcher's main duty is to explore the typicality of relations and events. So our duty is to formalize the events, my dear friends. And the third one is naturalism. Our duty is to study the people's behavior, the culture, and so on in the natural settings, not in the artificial settings, my dear friends. So these are the three things which we need to keep in mind if we want to understand about participant observation. Now, let us see the positive aspects of participant observation. The first one is it is least likely to lead researcher to impose their own reality on the social world. Impose their own reality. Second one is it seeks to understand actions as how and why practices and relations change. And the third one is observers record their own experiences in order to understand the cultural universe which their research subjects occupy and convey these observations to a wide audience, my dear friends, because you're going to study them and you're going to publish that so that the entire world can understand what is happening. So, these are the three positive aspects of participant observation. So, when we go for participant observation or anything, my dear friends, our duty is to look, listen carefully. Observation. Because if you're only going to see, then obviously what happens, you'll not be able to get answers. But if you're going to use only your ears, sometimes people may use verbal or non-verbal interaction, so you may miss. So both you must be able to see that people and you must be able to listen them. And if you're going to jot the notes then and there itself, so when you're going to write, so you're going to miss something. So be careful when you're going to do research. Both your senses must be active. You must see, you must listen. Remember that. But don't take much time. Go and sit at one place and make a rough notes, jot as rough notes. And after going home, my dear friends, don't take much time. You make it, prepare the notes, my dear friends. Turn the rough notes into the report, my dear friends. Do you know why? Because if you're going to take a lot of time, you may miss something, you may forget something. I hope all of you know your birthday. How many of you know your parents' birthday? Most of us we forget because we have never given much importance, but we know our favorite hero's birthday, favorite heroine's birthday, and so on, my dear friends. So sometimes you may have done the research out of interest, or sometimes because it's your livelihood, you're supposed to do it, or else it is for your academics, you may do out of interest or may not. If you're doing the exercise out of interest, you'll learn, you'll remember everything. But if it is not out of interest, if it is out of pressure or responsibility, at the time there are chances that we may miss some information. So when you're going to miss some information, in order to fill that vacuum, you or add the information, you anything so that you want to complete. It may not be real, my dear friends. So don't take much time. Okay. So you have to see, you have to listen so that you can understand their body language. You can see the patterns. You can see how people are going to work. All these things you can study it, my dear friends. Now let us go for non-participant observation. In this, the researcher is going to have limited interaction with the people whom he is going to observe. In the non-participant observation, it provides limited insights into the meaning of the social context which is being studied, my dear friends. Uh, If the people are to be studied in closed settings, my dear friends, the researcher is not a participant observer. He stays out of the group and he is going to study them. Sometimes, do you know what we do? We are going to put on a CC camera or else a video recording there, and we are going to gather the information about the people. We are not going to be present there. We use certain mechanisms in order to gather the information. So if it is a closed group, remember, if it is a closed group at that time or in a closed setting, we are going to use tape recorders, video recording, and so on, my dear friends. So when you're going to choose the tape recorder or video recorder in a setting, it depends on the larger part on whether it is permissible or not, whether it is possible for us to use this in the settings or not. So we have to keep these two things into mind, whether it is acceptable, whether it is permitted or not. If you see, in my college, we have CC cameras to ensure whether the teachers are delivering the lectures properly or not, whether the students are coming to the class or not. So we are going to put on the cameras, they are going to put on biometrics and so on. The same way here, when you're going to do the study, so whether you have the permission to utilize this or not, it depends on that. However, when we go for non-participant observation, we need to keep certain things in our mind. The first one is decisions regarding how to record the data. Okay, how to record the data. So it depends on the researchers IQ levels. It depends on the understanding about the topic or about the people on whom he is going to do the research, everything. So decision regarding the recording of data depends on the researcher's capability and qualities. Second one, if the researcher is trying to understand how people behave together and people in question can see each other, then they use video, which may be recommended. This is because of the important role that bodily based behavior plays a vital role in social processes. Without visual information, the researcher may not fully understand what inspires or transpires, my dear friends. And the third one is whether we are going to use this audio and video recording, whether it is going to be helpful and whether it helps the researcher to understand the reality, my dear friends. So these are the three things which we need to keep in mind when we go for non-participant observation. So for the qualitative studies, remember, we go for participant observation, my dear friends. Then let us go for systematic, structured, and controlled observation. In the systematic, structured, and controlled observation, the researcher is going to have the information and he is going to plan well in advance whom I have to observe, when I have to observe, where I have to observe, so that he's going to get the answers for the research questions, my dear friends. So he's going to have all the information well in advance, whom to be observed, where to be observed, and how to be observed. So it is well structured, and is going to control the observation, my dear friends. So there is a proper usage of more carefully drawn schedules and questionnaires in this method. And it is relatively easily possible to achieve structured, precise, reliable, and valid data, as it is going to eliminate or avoid inclusion of observers, because sometimes there may be some people who are biased. So we can control the bias, and we can also control the selection perception of events, my dear friends. So we are going to study the people in the natural settings, whether the experiment is done in the natural settings or in the laboratory doesn't matter, but um, it is done in controlled conditions. So there must be a question from your side, sir, what is natural setting and what is laboratory setting? In the industrial sociology, they have done experiments to see how to improve the industrial production. So what they have done two. They have taken all the people and they have divided them into two groups. One group, they have put them in the natural settings like routine work. All the people are going to work collectively that way. And the other team, like they have put on like cubicles, separate cabin for each and every individual, and they ask the people to work in isolation. They thought that people are working in the cabins because there will be no one to disturb them, so they will be working efficiently. At the initial stages, obviously the production has increased, but as the days have been passed on, do you know what happened? The boredom has been increased because of isolation. It has become a monotonic life. There is no one to interact with them. So obviously the production has come down. Whereas the people who are there or working in groups, whenever they are getting bored, they used to talk to each other. They used to crack jokes on each other. If any person is facing any trouble, then the rest of the co-workers, because they have developed informal relations, they used to help each other, my dear friends. So there the production was strength, whereas in isolation, the production has come down. So we are also going to create artificial laboratories or labs, and we are going to study about the human behavior in the laboratory settings. Also we are going to control the variables and see the human behavior, my dear friends, but these are structured, remember, and these are also controlled observations. Now let us study about unstructured and uncontrolled observation. In this, my dear friends, the observation is decided in the field at the spot of observation. Then and there itself, spotly they are going to decide. It is not pre-decided whom to be observed, where to be observed, how to be observed. All these things they are not going to do it. If they are going to get any occasion, then and there itself, the researcher is going to select the spot and he is going to make the observations, my dear friends. Thus, there is a greater opportunity for decision making. Okay, it is not going to decide over the people who are being observed. Is not going to decide what to be observed, how to be observed, how to record it, and so on. That's the reason why we call it as unstructured and uncontrolled observation, my dear friends. Now let us discuss about the sources of bias. Sources of bias. The first one is bias due to the observer. When the observer is influenced by his own opinion, attitude, and cultural values at the time of being observed or at the time of recording, at the time, do you know what happens? It leads to researchers' bias. Okay, so we need to keep in mind that the researcher does not have any bias in selecting the situation or selecting the people for the study. Second one, they can also be biased due to the individuals who are being observed. Sometimes, when people have the awareness of the observation situation, then they do not behave in a natural way. They do not behave in a natural way. They use artificial one. For example, think if somebody comes to my house, then at the time I may use very very sophisticated language. I may use very very sophisticated language towards my lady. But when people are not there, when people are not present, at the time I may behave differently. So when people are coming, when I come to know that some people are observing my behavior, so at the time when I come to know that, I use very very refined way, and I'm not going to behave with the people in the natural way, my dear friends. So we need to take certain measures in order to avoid these biases. Okay. The first one is the accuracy of observation method can be increased in four ways. The accuracy of observation method can be increased in four ways. The first one is what kind of methods or aids we are going to use, whether we are going to use camera, whether you're going to use tape recorder, and so on. Because these tools are not going to lie. It is going to record what is really happening, my dear friends. So we can increase the accuracy by using this camera tape recorder. Second one, use of checklist. The participants or the observed, uh, we are going to have a detailed description about the people who are being observed. Second one, we need to have an understanding about the settings where we are going to see the observation. Then third one, we need to have the clarity. What is the purpose of observation? Why you are going to observe? For example, when I was doing my masters, at the time we were supposed to submit a observational report on any human interaction. So I have selected a topic. Do you know what was that? There was a fellow who was selling different stones on the streets, and he was making a living. That too near the Secunderabad railway station. It is the capital of the state. It's a metropolitan city. Most of the people are educated. In spite of that, there was a person who was selling the stones and saying that it is going to change your fate. It is going to change your fate, or else it is going to improve your health condition, and so on. So I want to observe how that fellow is going to make a living, my dear friends. How he's going to attract the customers, because he's not going to invite all the people. He's going to identify the customers, and based on which he's going to play a certain role to attract them. So there must be a purpose. You need to have the clarity on that. And fourth one is types of behavior. What will be the behavior of the people, how they are going to respond. And the last one is what is the duration of that particular behavior, for how much time you're going to study them. All this, you need to have a checklist of all these things. Third one, you're going to select and appoint experienced observers. If you're not going to have experienced observers, remember that that means they will not be able to gather the information properly, or else you have to select a person and train them. So obviously you have to invest a lot of time, you have to invest a lot of money in training a person. So it is better to select and appoint an experienced person who can do the work effectively. And the fourth thing, we have to appoint several observers. We have to appoint several observers. Why several observers, guys? Because a person may see only from one dimension, and the other person can study it from the other dimensions. So you can bring all the dimensions together to make it a holistic one. So our duty is to appoint several observers, maybe for the small study also. So these are the things which we need to keep in mind if we want to have accuracy in terms of our observation. Now let us discuss about the strengths and limitations of observation. Observation helps us to understand the people's culture, their lifestyle, their patterns, and so on in the actual settings. Remember that people may not be willing to write their true views on the questionnaire or tell to a stranger. No one wants to come and share about their life. It may be positive or negative aspect. But if you're going to be with the people, remember, if you're going to be with the people for a longer period, when people become familiar with each other, at that time, there are chances that people may share their experiences. Remember that. So, in the participant observation, my dear friends, it helps us to build the rapport, which helps us to know the unknown, to get more information about any social life situation also, and so, my dear friends. There are numerous situations in any area of criminology or nowadays which is in much demand, and in most of the areas in de-addiction centers, in places where we are going to transform the criminals and so on, this participant observation is being used to study the human behavior. At the same time, my dear friends, these are the advantages, but it also has its own challenges. Do you know, it is difficult to gauge the role of the observer and what effect he or she has on the people and situations which are being observed. Because when I'm going to be very very close with the people, when I'm going to build up the rapport, it's sometimes I may also become sentimental. I may also try to help those people. Instead of getting the real information, I may also cook up some false information too. So to it will be difficult for us to measure what is the role of the observer, to what kind of effect is going to have on the people, and how on the situations and so on. Okay, it takes some years for observation. It takes years for observation, because so when we go to the people at the instance, they may not accept us. So we have to stay there for longer period to convince them and then get the information, my dear friends. And when you want to go for experimental, like it is sometimes it is reduced to experimental conditions. It depends on the laboratory situations, it depends on the conditions, what kind of control variables should be controlled, and so on, my dear friends. So we are going to have these kind of challenges in terms of observation. But remember, participant observation is one of the best tool for knowing the unknown or for qualitative studies, my dear friends. Then let us go for the next tool, that is interview schedule. Interview is defined as a verbal interaction between the interviewer and the interviewee, between the researcher and the respondent. In the interview schedule or in the interview, my dear friends, the researcher is going to ask the questions orally, and the respondent is going to give the answers orally, and the researcher is going to jot down the notes, my dear friends. So it is a verbal interaction, and also takes place in face-to-face contact, because both the people are going to see each other, and one person is going to put the questions and is going to get the responses from the respondent or the interviewee, my dear friends. So let us discuss about the types of interviews. Based on the functions, a number of persons involved in the interview process, and formats of the interviews can be classified into six types. For example, if you want to study, if you want to study the problems, especially in the de-addiction centers, like why people are addicted to drugs, why people are smoking, why people consume alcohol, or else why a person has committed any crime. If you want to know the causes so that you can help the people to come out of that issues, psychological issues of pain at the time, you go for that. So we call them as diagnostic or assessment interviews. Diagnostic or assessment interviews, if you want to understand the problems. Okay, then the next one is depending on the number of persons engaged in the interview process, we call it as either individual or group interviews. If I'm going to have one-to-one interaction or like, then we call it as individual interviews. But the researcher is going to gather the information from a group of people at a time simultaneously. Then we call it as group interviews, my dear friends. So first one is diagnostic or assessment interviews. Second one is based on the number. It can be individual or it can be group interviews. Third one, based on the interview format, it can be classified into two types. One is structured and the other one is unstructured interviews. If you are going to prepare the set of questions well in advance, look, you have said what kind of questions I need to ask, what kind of answers I have to get from the respondents. Like if you have a structure well in advance, and if you are going to put on the same questions to each and every respondents, then we call it as structured interviews. Sometimes the interviews you are going to ask the questions well and instantly then and there itself, that we call it as unstructured or non-structured interviews. For example, for example, I may ask like any of you people are like students are married or not. If the boy says I'm unmarried, then I may put on the question, will you get married? Maybe yes. When you say yes, how much time do you require to get married? Maybe 2 years or 5 years. Like the person may say, let me settle in life. Then I ask, what do you mean by settlement? So based on the questions then and there itself, instantly then and there itself, I'm going to prepare the questions and put the questions to the respondent. Then we call it as unstructured or non-structured interviews. Now, based on the social environment, based on the clients or social environment, it can be called as intervention interviews. Based on the clients or based on the social environment, we can call it as intervention interviews. For example, in most of the interviews, what we do is that we want to study the problems or the issues which are there in reality. Sometimes when I go as a sociologist, I have a pre-notion that the rural area will be like this or the tribal area will be like this. And there are plenty of people who are illiterate, ignorant, and so and so. And I make a model and I go to the people. But after going there, do you know, people may not like the idea or the model which I have taken, because it may be it may not fix into the reality. Let me give one example. When Chandrababu Naidu was the CM of Undivided or United AP, at the time he has gone for, he wants to transform. He wants to transform the society into a skilled society. He doesn't want any person to be unskilled or semi-skilled labor. So do you know what they have done? So most of the girls, they are staying at home, doing nothing like. So he thought like, let us train certain skill for them so that during the free time, they may select an occupation of their choice, make some living, earn for the nation as well as for the family. So what they have done is that they have gone to the people and they said that we are going to train you. We are going to train you with the tailoring program. Then none of the girls came forward. Then they said that after the successful training program, we are going to conduct a nominal examination and we are going to provide you ITI certificate so that you can get a job in some industry, government industry, or so on. But even then, people did not say anything. Later on, they said that along with this, we also give a tailoring machine worth 18,000 free of cost to you guys. Then all the girls raised the hand saying that I want to learn. And they selected only 50 people and they have trained them for 6 months, provided IDS certificate, and then also a saving machine. And after that, after 6 months, they want to interview the people. They want to interview the people to know how this policy is being implemented, whether it's successful or not. They waited for 6 months to know the impact of the training program. Then they went to the people. They started interviewing. Your name is XYZ? Yes. You have learned tailoring? Yes. What are you doing? Nothing. Where is the machine? On the shelf, top of the shelf. They went to the second house, the same thing. Third, same thing. They have gone to one house. They asked, what are you doing? Nothing. Where is the tiling machine? Not there, not on the shelf. What have you done? She was laughing. They went to the 50th house and they asked, you learned tailoring? Yes. What are you doing? I'm practicing it. How come you are practicing it? Then she said that we belong to the Tyler community. Before that, only my husband used to work. Right now, I have learned it. So I'm stitching female garments, and my husband is stitching for the males. Then they asked, "Do you know one machine is missing? Do you have any information about that?" Then the same this lady was also laughing. Why you're laughing? Tell me what happened. Then the lady said that lady sold it for me. For how much? Only 500. Because there are 49 people with 49 machines and they were ready to sell it because there was only a tiler, one tiler in the house, in the village, entire village. Already this lady got one machine, one old machine was there. So they purchased a new machine for the husband and the rest of the 48 machines were on the shelf, my dear friends, of no use. So sometimes we go and interview the people in the social settings or to study the about the clients, anything. Okay, so we call this as intervention interviews. Then we also have formal interviews for the jobs and so on. We have formal interviews and we also have informal interviews. Now let us discuss about some of these types of interviews in detail. The first one is structured or regulated interviews. In this type of interview, the researcher has some control over the respondents. That means he's going to prepare the questions well in advance. He's going to prepare a question or a structure about what kind of questions I need to ask, how to ask, when to ask. We are going to have all this. So to get appropriate responses, the interviews are regulated by giving the option of multiple choice to the respondents, or sometimes we may also have descriptive one. Just like you have multiple choice, we give the questions and we are going to give the options beneath. So we are going to give the options. So we can have two types of questions. One is open-ended questions and the other one is closed-ended questions. Whenever we talk about closed-ended questions, my dear friends, you're going to give the questions and you're going to give the options. Okay, that means the respondent has to select the answer, whatever he has, which is very, very close to the multiple choice or the answers which are given beneath the question. But when you talk about open ended questions, that means the researcher is going to give much space for the researcher to put on his responses, my dear friends. So here we may use closed ended questions or we may also use open ended questions. open-ended questions in order to gather the information from the people. But we are going to prepare the questions well in advance, remember that. And we are also going to prepare a sequence of the questions. Both in the interview schedule and in the questionnaire, my dear friends, we are going to have three types of questions. First one, questions which are directly related with the topic. We are going to prepare the questions which are directly related with the topic, my dear friends. Second set of questions, we are going to use it which depict the social and economical condition of the people. So we are going to prepare the questions so that we can understand about the social and economical condition, like what is their age, what is the caste, what is the religion, what is the educational qualification, whether they have the habit of reading newspapers, watching news, and so on. Then what is their job, what is their income, what is the type of family, what is the size of family, how many rooms are there. All this we try to depict the social and economical condition of the people. Okay. And the third one is patting questions. If you want to get additional information, or if you want to verify the answers given by the respondent, we go for patting questions. Just like if you must have seen people playing cricket. Once a new bat comes, they're not going to directly go and play. Do you know why? If they play, the bat will break into pieces because the wood also has tiny holes. So these cricketers, they are going to apply the oil to the bat and they are going to pat it so that slowly they are going to use the ball and play with the bat so that whatever the vacuum or the tiny holes are there, that will be closed and it makes the bat very, very stronger. The same way, when we go to the people, sometimes people may not provide the right information to us. So it is our duty to, if you have any doubt, it is your duty to re-verify the data. So these patting questions can help us to verify the data and also get additional information for our study, my dear friends. So in the structured interviews, we are preparing the questions well in advance. We are going to put the questions in sequence and then. So when you're going to put them, when you're going to interview the people, remember, use simple questions so that people get motivated. Then use tough or emotional questions in between. And at last, again, make them comfortable. When the people have become very emotional, at the time you simply end your interview process, and if you go, they are going to carry these emotions along with them. And they may get psychologically disturbed, and they may also create trouble for their family members, or sometimes they may not help the other interviewer, because if some other person comes, they may not like the process, so they may not. So it is the duty of the researcher to understand the logic. And when people are becoming emotional, you also have the freedom to change the switch on the questions so that they feel comfortable, and later on you try to probe in depth so that you get the information. As a researcher, your duty is to gather the information, but how you're going to ask the questions, it depends on your capability, it depends on your skill. Okay. uh, then we'll study about unstructured or unregulated interviews. In the unstructured interviews, my dear friends, we are not going to prepare the questions well in advance. The interview is not fixed, it is flexible as per the convenience of the researcher and the respondent, my dear friends. They are going to frame the questions then and there itself, my dear friends. Now, let us discuss about the place of interview. In social sciences interview, my dear friends, the interview can happen anywhere, at the home, in the office, on the streets, or in any office, on the TV platform, or anywhere. Remember, in terms of social sciences, we can conduct the interview as per the convenience of the interviewer and the interviewee, nothing but the researcher and the respondent. They must be flexible. When we were doing a study on male prostitution way in 2005, there was a global study taken up in the year 2005 to study whether we also have male people indulged in prostitution. So there are five cities which are selected in India, and Hyderabad was one of the city which was selected to know whether there are male prostitutes like. So I was going here and there. I don't know how to identify the people. It took almost 2.5 months to find one person. And when I found that person, I cannot even directly talk to him. I said, "Yeah, we'll talk. I'm something about your life, everything." And the fellow took me on the railway tracks from Nampally railway station. It took me almost 1 kilometer, and then he sat on the track and he asked me, "Bhaiya, you sit here, then we'll talk. Tell me what you want." So if I want to gather the information, if I want to get the information, I have to ensure that the respondent is comfortable to provide. So it depends on the interviewer and the interviewee, where we have to interview the person and how to gather the information. Place can be anywhere. It can be in the natural settings or it can be in the artificial settings also. Remember, artificial setting also. Sometimes the respondent may not wish to share the information in public. For example, think a person has stabbed another person to death on the street. A person has saw that and he wants to go to the police and give the information. But he may say that, "Sir, don't reveal my identity because the person may harm me." So sometimes the person wants privacy. Want privacy. So based on the comfortability, we have to based on the flexibility of the people, we have to decide our settings, my dear friends. Sometimes home visits also helps a lot because we can not only ask the information, we can also see the social settings, my dear friends. We can see the reality, what is happening. Okay, so we can understand the living conditions of the respondents also. So these are the so based on the things, whether it's at home or the streets, we can decide the place for the interview. Now let us discuss about the strengths and limitations of interview. Let us discuss about the strength and limitations of interview. First one. First one is possible to study events that are not open for observation. Because if you want to observe the people, sometimes you may not have access into the settings. Sometimes you sometimes there are events which are known only to the respondent, and that respondent, if is not going to help us, then we'll not be able to study them. So whatever cannot be studied through observation can be studied through interviews, my dear friends. Next advantage is that we can study abstract factors like attitudes of the individuals, feelings, emotions, reactions, and so on, my dear friends. How they are going to respond to a particular phenomena or particular situation, whether they're happy, unhappy, or something like. All the emotions can be studied. For example, that too only in face-to-face interactions. See, for example, if you're going to talk to a person only over telephone, you're putting on the questions and he is going to give the response. I do not know what are the feelings. He is simply, for example, you're in the party, you're in the party, and somebody called you and said that someone expired. He may not be very, very close to you, but he may be a classmate or some long distant relative, and so. So we simply say, "Ayo, how it happened," that's it. But in reality, we are not very sympathetic. We are not going to emotionally connect with that. And once the phone is kept aside, we go back and again enjoy with the friends, my dear friends. So this cannot be observed. So only in the interviews, my dear friends, in face-to-face interviews or audio video interviews, my dear friends, we'll be able to assess the attitudes, the feelings of the individuals. Third one is we'll be able to study the phenomena in the historical way. Through the interviews, my dear friends, we can understand the real uh, we can understand and ascertain the information, my dear friends. Not only feelings, my dear friends, we can also study the sentiments, feelings, everything, and what are the causes for the social phenomena and how people are going to see this can be studied, my dear friends. The fourth advantage is that the information which is gathered is reliable because if you're going to have any doubt, then and there itself, you're going to again verify the data. So it gives scope for verification of data spontaneously. And the last advantage is that even past events can also be studied through these methods. We can also study the past events and how this is going to affect the people, how it is going to affect the human relations. Everything can also be studied, my dear friends. So these are the advantages of this interview. Now let us discuss about some of the limitations of this interview, my dear friends. Some of the disadvantages. The first one is possible to study events that, sorry, sorry. Uh, the data collected sometimes may be of doubtful character, because sometimes when you're going to select the respondent, there may be researcher's bias, because I may interview a person who is close to me, who gives the answers. Or else sometimes you must have seen that some of the people were motivated to give the certain kind of responses so that they get benefited. So there are chances that they can be researchers bias. Okay, so sometimes even when we are going to use the checks for controlling the bias may not be successful also. Second one is too much dependency on memory. Sometimes when we are going to interview the people, we may write, if the schedule is very smaller, you can write, or sometimes you have to keep all the thing in your mind, my dear friends. So sometimes what happens, we may miss some of the things, and we may not um, really get the right data, my dear friends, because of personal prejudice, personal bias, and so on. The next one is that there may be difference in the social background of the interviewer and the interviewee, and there are chances that there may be discrimination between the two. For example, for example, if a Christian comes and or sorry, forget about religion. For example, you see some section of people have different food patterns compared with the other. So in some societies or communities, the food may be prohibited, whereas in the other communities, it may be. So, looking at this, my dear friends, there are chances that they may look the other people down, or else they may not simply agree to the things, my dear friends. For example, whether cow slaughtering in India should be banned or not. There are certain states they are saying that it should be banned, whereas certain people are saying that it is our staple food. And why you want to get rid of eating that cow? So even there are different responses. It may lead to discrimination, my dear friends. I'm just giving example. Okay. The next one is specialist knowledge is not possible all the times, because we may go to a person who is not well educated, who is not well trained, so that person may not have specialized knowledge, my dear friends. So we may not get the right information for our study. That is one of the problem. The next one is sometimes the whatever the research respondent is going to narrate, we have to listen to them and record them, my dear friends. Every detail is not useful for the study. Even though it is not useful, my dear friends, we are supposed to listen to them, or else the respondent may get offended and he may not provide the information, even though it is not. So sometimes there is danger in terms of getting unnecessary information. The next one is a lot of subjectivity and individual feelings. In this, my dear friends, because we are going to interview the people, so at that time there are chances that the people may give a lot of their personal experiences and so on, because of their social background, because the way they look the things, because of their surroundings and so on. Their lifestyle may vary, my dear friends. So the subjectivity and the individual feelings make the data to be doubtful, my dear friends. The next one is we are going to have inferiority complex. There are certain questions. Sometimes the researcher doesn't know whether I should ask this kind of questions or not. If I'm going to ask these questions, how the respondent is going to feel. So sometimes he may, because of this inferiority complex, he may simply get dumb, or else even the respondent may not give the answers, my dear friends. And the last one is there may be too much importance to the respondent. So when we are going to give too much importance to the respondent, my dear friends, at the time, do you know what happens? It may get they may be emotionally attached to each other, and they may give the false information also, my dear friends. So these are the limitations of the interview schedule, my dear friends. So today we have discussed about observation, my dear friends. Saying something with a purpose, we call it as observation. Observation is of two types: structured, unstructured. Like, then we have said that whenever we are going to go for this observation, we have to keep our senses active. Don't write in front of the people. Listen to them, see them, and after some time, go and jot down the notes. And then, after going home, prepare the notes, spare notes, my dear friends. Don't take too much time, because there are chances that we may miss some of the important aspects, so that our study will not be fulfilled. So, when you go to the people, my dear friends, tell them what is the purpose, like why you came. Get involved into the activity, so that you can have a better understanding into the reality, my dear friends. So whatever observation cannot be done, we can use interview schedule, my dear friends. Interview schedule, my dear friends, can be of two types. One is structured and the other one is unstructured, my dear friends. If you're going to prepare the question well in advance, and if you're going to prepare the put the questions to each and every person, then we call it as structured interviews. And if you are going to put on the questions, frame the questions, then and there itself, instantly, then we call it as unstructured or non-structured interviews. Based on the clinical purpose, if you want to find a solution for the problems, if you understand what are the causes for the problems, then we go for diagnostic or assessment interviews. Based on the number of people to be interviewed. It can be of individual interviews or group interviews. It can also be interviews, can also be intervention interviews, formal interviews, and informal interviews, my dear friends. So this case study, sorry, observation and interviews are the best tools for qualitative studies. So if you have any doubts, you can ask me, my dear friends. In the next class, we'll go for the other tools, case study, and so on. If you have any doubts, you are free to ask.
No, sir, thank you.
Thank you, madam.